This is not a test. Stay calm in an orderly fashion. Make your way to the lifeboats.
Mayday, the ship is sinking.
So I am sitting here with nationally certified peer recovery coach and co-host of this show, Christian Powell. And I just want to open it up. We're going to do a little interview today, and I want to open it up to see just who you are. You know, I want you to tell the people that are listening, who are you and what's your experience in recovery?
So as Hunter mentioned, I am a peer recovery coach. I'm a nationally certified through NADAC for my peer recovery coach. I am also co-owner / general manager of Wellness INX, which is a peer support recovery program found in Lansing, Michigan.
So what is that exactly, peer support recovery program?
So peer support recovery, just like I said, I'm a recovery coach. So peer support recovery is focused about training individuals who may have had experience with recovery or addiction or have been in addiction themselves, and then will end up going and giving back to their community. So peer support relates to a peer individual or an individual who is your peer, and they will go and help an individual that they're meeting with or whoever it might be to identify barriers to goals that they're trying to accomplish. So if, let's say, a goal is something like, I don't know, getting your car back or getting a license or going back to school or something like that, we identify that as the goal. Then we identify the subsequent barriers to that goal. It can be anything like, well, I don't have a house, or I don't have income, I don't have a job, or I have a lot of court fines or fees or something like that. And then slowly but surely, we help them make a plan and create accountability to start removing some of those barriers so that they can achieve that goal. A recovery coach will end up working with an individual anywhere from, on the low end, 3 to 6 months, on the high end, years.
Okay.
So, but I'm the general manager of Wellness INX, so I manage a lot of recoveries. I'm also a co-trainer or with you in Recovery Coach Academy, which is where we train these people to do these things
Right.
so they can go out and get a job and all that kind of stuff. But I'm what's called a core trainer. A core trainer is an individual that essentially can train trainers. So I'm a core trainer through CCAR, which is Connecticut Community on Addiction Recovery, which is kind of, they are one of the leading voices. They're not the only leading voice, but definitely one of the leading voices in the nation. I would dare even say internationally in recovery, in the recovery movement, in the movement on removal of stigma and things like that.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your experience with recovery. Are you in recovery yourself?
I am in recovery myself. So I, as you already know, so for those of you who are listening, he knows a lot of the answers to the questions he's probably asking, but for your benefit, so I am in recovery. I have a little bit over 6 years of recovery. I started off with alcohol and cannabis addiction were definitely my two major vices, as you would say, are my two major things that I was addicted to. But I was addicted to a whole cornucopia of different things. But long story made short, I got addicted to alcohol pretty much straight out of high school, maybe a year or two afterwards. I really struggled when I was a kid quite a bit with like compulsive lying and stuff like that. A lot of that had to do with the friends and the environment that I was around. I struggled quite a bit in school, even to the point where I didn't complete high school. I ended up going to get my GED and then higher education later on with a college degree. But when I was young, I struggled with depression. I struggled with anxiety. I struggled with a lot of the things that I think a lot of people in addiction struggle with. And those things led me to need an outlet. They led me to want and desire not to feel that way anymore. And after I found alcohol, man, I was off to the races. My family, I do have people who struggle with addiction in my family. Many of them are in recovery now. But I had the gene. And as soon as I tried a little bit of alcohol, as soon as I tried a little bit of cannabis and things like that, man, it was never going back. And I used for a good many years. And it wasn't until I really hit rock bottom where I wanted to end up hurting and inevitably trying to kill myself. That's when things got really real for me. And that's when I started to realize I need to make a change. And that onus of responsibility to make that change is on me. I can't rely on other people, because that was my entire life, man. Was all my life I blamed other people for what I was doing to myself. All my life, I would hold other people accountable if something didn't go right for me. And whether it be anything from failing my test to losing my job to whatever it might be, it was always, this is somebody else's fault. Look what you did to me. Instead of me realizing, like, at some point in time, yeah, maybe some people might have been responsible, but I'm not going to hold them accountable to the things that I need to be accountable to. And that's really what started to, as you heard last week and as I talked to you about all the time, that's when I got the revelation of recovery. That's when I started to get to the only way for me to get past this is I have to click the switch in my head. I have to start making that conscious decision, which those of you who listened to the podcast, I don't think it was last Monday, but the previous Monday, we talked about going from pre-contemplation to contemplation. That's what happened. In a moment's notice, it was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. I have to start doing something else. And within that first week of me being in recovery, man, I wanted to do nothing else but run back into it. But it was something where, by the grace of God, or people's higher power, I call him God. I'm a believer in Christ. But when I started to believe in those things, when I started to really think like, the only way through this is pushing forward. The only way through this is small incremental changes over time. That I went through the one day to the next, just don't use, just don't use, just don't use. And then I woke up one morning and it's like, oh my gosh, man, I got a year into this thing. And I woke up the next, I got 2 years into this thing. And it's gotten to the point, but it's gotten to the point where I can comfortably walk by the liquor aisle without having a ghost of a thought. I can comfortably walk through the liquor aisle if it's quicker to get to the coffee aisle without even taking a second or third look to my right or left. Mm-hmm. It's nothing, it doesn't affect me. Now, does that mean I've stopped or I've let the gas off? Absolutely not. Right. I'm still doing meditations. I'm still constantly, for gosh sakes, I work in the field. But at the end of the day, I consider recovery to be my most important thing in my life. That's why I think we're doing this podcast. That's why I think, I got into the field the way that I did. And that's certainly why today I can say that I have more than 6 years clean and sober.
Awesome. So I want to ask you a couple things about your story there. So you talked about that switch from pre-contemplation to contemplation. For those of you who didn't tune in, from not believing you had an issue to believing you had an issue, right? So what made that switch flip for you?
Well, and here's, there's I can give you the truth, and then I can give you I guess the archetype, if you will. And for those of you who listen to us over an extended period of time, I love to talk about archetypes. I love to really get into what underlines human nature, why we do some of the things we do, and think that like we're unique and that we did it the first time. And the reality is like human beings have been doing it for tens of thousands of years. It ain't new. I had a series of dreams that scared the heck out of me. That got me really, really clear on, I'm worth more. I'm worth, fighting for. I'm worth saving. I'm worth something to somebody more than myself. In that I had not only, it was not only necessary, but obligatory, that I had an obligation to do something with my life. I had an obligation to my family. I had an obligation to my friends. I had an obligation utmost to myself, but I had an obligation to the community as a whole. For a long time, I was lying, cheating, stealing, cashing fraudulent checks. I should be in prison by now. Thank God I'm not. I definitely had some times there where I was getting calls from the banks that they told me very clearly, you have X amount of time to get us this money, or we will be reporting you to, the federal authorities. So I was committing felony acts. But at the end of the day, I thank God I had a family around me who bailed me out time and time again. And I really see them as a support system now. But going kind of to the archetype, I think it really was that I hit rock bottom. I hit a place where I had two choices. I can either continue doing what I'm doing and things will undoubtedly get worse. Mm-hmm. And they're really bad now. So worse, I can't even comprehend, because the nature of things is atrophy. If you leave things alone, they are bound to get worse. You have to continue to pour into it to keep it going, which is a great analogy for recovery, right?
Right.
And then I decided I can let things get worse, or I can change something. I don't know what, but I can change something. So my first thing right off the bat. That is like Revelation Recovery switches on. I committed to myself and to the people around me, because commitment is very little, especially if you're somebody like me with a disease of instant gratification. Commitment's very little to me at first. It is a very large thing to me now, and it's an integrated part of my recovery. But at first, it was something that I could care less. I'm going to start weightlifting. I'm going to get big, or, I'm going to eat right, or, I'm going to read more, whatever. And then I wake up the next morning and none of those things have happened. And I have no interest in doing, I got it tomorrow, or, I'll just start next weekend, or I better start. No, the first of the month is always a really good, over and over and over again, I gave myself those excuses. And it wasn't until I started making the commitment to my family members and things like that, that I will no longer lie. Not, I'll try not to be more honest, or try not to be dishonest, rather. I'll try to be more honest. And it's like, no. Hard line, because especially in early addictions, and probably pretty much in regular addiction, right? We often find ourselves in a place where we take very hard opinions about things that we know very little about. And we make snap judgments, and we will hold to those as if it were, no pun intended, the lifeboat that is going to carry us to safety. And it wasn't until I stood my ground and said, I'm not going to lie anymore. Like, I'm going to make sure that whatever's ahead of me, I'm not going to lie. I don't know how it's going to look. Radical honesty. That's what it's going to take. And this was before I ever discovered the 12 steps. Mm-hmm. Now, just like many things, the funny thing is there was a lot of people around me. Like I said, I have a lot of people in recovery in my family that were saying I needed to go to AA, that were saying I need to get honest and things like that. So later on, the 12 step stuff became integrated. But the first step for me was radical honesty with myself, self-evident truth. I need help. This is a problem. It has become unmanageable. It's taking control of my life. Radical honesty with other people. I don't like that. I do like that. Or being honest with them in places that I've wronged with them. Hey, mom, dad, I compulsively lied to you over this, this, and this. And by doing that, that's what really the first 4 steps of AA is,
I was
right?
Say you started working the steps.
Unknowingly. And I think that's the beauty, I think, of the 12 steps, is going back to that archetypal concept. They hit at a chord that is in underlying human nature for what we would call the epiphany of the epiphany of a Christ-like figure, mm-hmm. The epiphany of the ability to take oneself, be honest, and use transformation through that process. I'm going to be honest with myself. I'm going to be honest with other people. But in being honest with other people, that means that I'm no longer going to tell lies, but even the lies that I did have, I'm going to uncover those, and I'm going to try to make amends for those things. Because in all honesty, I know what was wrong, what I did to you. And if I'm going to be honest with myself, I need to be honest with you, make the amends so that I can then become more honest with myself. Because if I'm carrying something with me, it's going to destroy me. And I saw that a lot in early recovery, is I would carry things with me. Mm-hmm. I would carry things like, oh gosh, I can't tell this, or no, it's not time to say that. Or if I tell anybody that, man, they're never going to forgive me, or it's going to affect my life, or they're going to throw me away and, throw the key out. There's a whole litany of excuses, but it really came down to, let's just start being honest no matter what. And by the grace of, God, my higher power, I started doing a lot of things where people that I wronged, I would run into them in public. And it's like, oh, come on. Yeah. Like, really? Like, I'd run into people in public, and then I would feel a piercing gut. Like, if you're going to make an amends, now's the time to do it. When else are you going to do it? You're going to just hit them up on Facebook one day? I'm sorry. No, make the amends now. And time again, I did that. And I know this isn't true for many people, but time and time again, people forgave me. Mm-hmm. And it led me to be the man that I am today, to be the father that I am today, the husband that I am today, because of that initial, like, I need to start being honest.
For sure. So you talked a lot about internal changes. So that honesty, that was the biggest one you talked about there, right? So what about external changes? What did you change in your external world as you came into recovery?
Well, I think, obviously, as we've talked many times, it starts internally, and it inevitably will start to affect your external. So the things that I changed, like right off the bat, people, places, things. I stopped going around the people that I shouldn't be around because every time I go around them, we're smoking or we're drinking.
Mhm.
I stopped going to the places and going down the streets and all those kinds of things because I knew if I went down the street, I'm going to stop at the liquor store. Or if I went over here, I was going to, catch that itch as I was driving. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to pass this exit without stopping over at Mix so I can pick up a fifth or something like that. So that's places and things. I had to do things like get rid of my smartphone. I went down to the clamshell for a while. I'm back at a smartphone, much to the chagrin of my wife, but I am back to the smartphone and I'm able to communicate with people that way. But at first it was like, this is a piece of technology that has enabled my bad behavior and dishonesty and alcoholism over and over and over again. And if I don't get rid of this thing, it's going to continue to be a problem. So I scrapped it. I got rid of pretty much everybody's numbers other than like my immediate, like these are my emergency contacts.
Mhm.
And I started reading, started writing, started listening to better music that wasn't going to portray like misogyny or music that wasn't going to portray drug use and things like that. And I started getting really, what society would say square.
Mhm.
Like, is it okay to be square? Yes. I've seen the worst that humanity has to offer in many lights. And I can tell you undoubtedly, without a doubt in my mind, I would rather be a square like I am today sometimes than be the individual that I was before. Because guess what? In being a square, it's liberating. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of different things that have been provided for me. There's a lot of different opportunities that I would never get if I was back in my addiction. And those things are way cooler than anything I could have ever experienced.
I know that's right. So I want to kind of break off a little bit and talk a little bit about some things going on outside of yourself. So what about with the recovery community and stuff here locally? What are you seeing right now?
So the recovery community locally, barring COVID, COVID has been, we'll go COVID first. And I think before COVID, what I was seeing. So COVID's a massive problem.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously it is affecting the recovery community in an almost inconceivable way. A year ago, we were getting the opioid epidemic under control. Now, when I say control, it was a massive problem still.
Right.
It still is a massive problem today. It's even worse of a problem. But we at least were starting to implement strategies that were making a statistical effect, that were making an empirically evidence-based, evidence-driven effect.
You're talking about locally, we're seeing.
Locally.
Okay.
Somewhat nationally, but definitely locally.
Okay.
We were seeing this. We were seeing the opening of many other businesses that were picking up the load of being able to help recoveries, whether it be 3/4 houses. Shout out to Endeavor House Ministries. They talked about them last week, but I sit as chairman on the board there. So they're still doing a fantastic job. Even though COVID's hit, they're doing a fantastic job. They were doing a great job back then too. But there were many businesses that were popping up that were evolving with whatever was happening inside of the community. And it was awe-inspiring. Since COVID has hit, that is no longer the case. Since COVID has hit, there are many businesses in Lansing that have shut down. Since COVID has hit, there's been many agencies that have been forced to rethink and re-strategize on how they are combating opiates, how they are interacting with the recovery community. And with the advent of COVID, there was a lot of advance, like going to Zoom and being able to explore an entirely new realm of what does it look like to find recovery online. Mm-hmm. That was interesting, but unanimously it has been found that even though you can find great meetings online and you can find, through telemed, your therapist online and being able to talk to maybe a recovery coach like myself and you or whatever it might be, it's not as effective as in person. There's just something missing there. The level of human connection is shallower than what it would be in person. And because of that, we have seen we're back at 2013, I believe the last check was, but 2013 levels of overdose in the Lansing area, which is horrific. That was very, very bad. We were seeing fentanyl come in quite a bit. And it's turning somewhat into a powder keg of a nightmare situation. With that being said, I think that there's a lot of interesting and amazing things that the recovery community is doing. I think that even though there have been budget cuts statewide and locally to many programs, they are doing the best with what they can, and they are awe-inspiring to me in their ability to be able to reconnect with the community and try to iron their way out going forward. But I think all in all, we're really struggling right now. Yeah, I think we're just really struggling right now, and I don't know what's next for the recovery community. I hope this podcast may have an effect, but I think at the end of the day, we really have to start looking towards, we have to do the good old fashioned things that we used to do, which is like, we have to go lobby, we have to go protest, we have to go and talk to the politicians that are, controlling a lot of the levers around state and federal grants and things like that, because I get it. We're at a time where a lot of people are out of work and a lot of people are struggling, but there's a lot of businesses out there that are struggling. And what we will inevitably see over time is, if some of these businesses aren't able to be funded, then their services will have to be cut back. If their services will have to be cut back, then we will see the people that were utilizing those services not get as high quality services as they were before, and certainly not getting the amount of services that they had before. And we will see this problem that we're seeing now, the back at 2013 numbers, we will see that start to rise and start to turn into the hockey stick, where it's just boop and then straight up.
Right.
And that's a problem. So that's something that I see happening right now.
So I want to kind of go off that a little bit. So I've seen the same thing, and I know that it's hard for people in recovery right now. I know there's still some opportunities there for the face-to-face, and don't get me wrong, the convenience of Zoom is awesome, but like you said, it doesn't mimic face-to-face interaction. So what do you see as a possible encouragement for people in recovery as a way to get back plugged in, at least on a smaller scale, that's in a safe way to where they don't have to worry about the ongoing pandemic right now?
So fantastic question. So I think there's going to have to be a level of boldness that people share. We will not be able to maintain lockdowns the way that we have been in for much longer. And that's pretty clear. And I'm the first person to say, like, mask up, take precautions. I've had COVID myself. It's a nightmare. Wouldn't want to wish it on my worst enemies. I've had very close loved ones that have had COVID that have almost died because of it. At the end of the day, there is going to have to be somewhat of a collection of the recovery communities at large that are going to come together and have a conversation. Excuse me. That are willing to come together and have a conversation about how we're going to implement these things. Because right now, much of the recovery communities are fragmented. And one of the things that is troublesome to me is, I think what you will see at first is 1, 2, 3 meetings become somewhat bold enough that they start saying, we're coming back together against government orders. Then you're going to see other meetings start to say, well, if we don't come back together, we're going to lose, our meetings altogether. And these people did it, so we're going to do it. And I think ultimately you will see a bunch of these meetings start to pop up because people will have had enough. And I do not think that is the appropriate or right way to go about it. I think that if we as recovering drug addicts, alcoholics, whatever it might be, were to come together and have a conversation about what is the best way for us to do this, and then get at least a schedule for right now down, saying like, okay, you and you are going to do meetings on this day, and you are going to have meetings on this day. I think that would be okay. Now, I know Lifeboat, for example, located at 913 West Holmes, suite number 285.
A little bit of shameless advertisement.
Yeah, self-promotion right there. I know Lifeboat, we're having hybrid meetings. So we are opening it up. Not a lot of them. We're only doing them one a day, and we've got like COVID protocol through the roofs, and the couple of people that are running it are vaccinated and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, we're not forcing that upon anybody. We're saying, if you want to come in, you can come in, but we're only allowing a handful of people, very limited. Right. The rest of you can come in on Zoom, and we would prefer you to check in with us, let us know how this is going to go. And I think that's okay to do something like that. I don't think it's okay to just like call mom and pop, hey, we're getting back together. We're getting the gang back together. And then all of a sudden you show up and there's 30 people at a meeting. 2 of them are, 2 or 3 people aren't wearing masks. There's 4 or 5 people drinking coffee. Like, you've been to meetings before. They're drinking coffee like it's water. So they're taking a mask down every last time. You're stuffed in shoulder to shoulder. I think that's going to be a problem. So I don't know what the next step is around that. My suspicion is, though, that it's like, just if we're willing to have the conversation with each other and really start to do this, or maybe if somebody's bold enough to come out and be like, we're going to start doing meetings again, announcing to everybody, this is how we're doing it. Kind of like we're doing now. We're doing it hybrid, and we're doing, these are the COVID protocols. These are the things that are taking place. So if you do choose to come to this meeting, this is what you can expect, and be willing to be turned away. Because if we have too many people, or if we have capacity, we're not going to make excuses.
Yep. And one thing good to know, they are actually starting to implement that for all of our listeners. They are starting to implement some face-to-face meetings back in person with the 12-step programs.
Sure.
And they're kind of keeping that. It's Capital Service Area website. If you go on there, you can look at what the requirements are and seatings and things like that. So yeah,
good stuff
for sure. So what about on a national level? What are you seeing in the recovery community right now?
I see. Well, at the time of this recording, we're in a place of national change. We're changing presidents right now from President Trump to President Biden. With that being said, on a national level, a lot of difficulty. There's a lot of really good things happening. There's a lot of really bad things happening, just like on the local and state levels. On the state level, or not on the state level, I'm sorry, on the national level, one really, really good thing is the grassroots recovery movements that are popping up. Recovery community organizations, as they're called, RCOs. Lifeboat is one of those, but there's plenty of them, several of them in Michigan, many of them all over the nation. They're popping up, and they're trying to innovate in the best ways that they possibly can on how to be the new wave, or be the next movement, or be the innovating voice around recovery. And I think that's fantastic, because when you have a bunch of really driven people like that are all saying, for lack of a better analogy, like the Who's down in Whoville, we are here, we are here, we are here. They're saying, we are here, we are recovering, we need help, get us funding, and they're pushing to drive. The Recovery Foundation in Las Vegas is a 501c4. It's a perfect example of that. They do a lot of political action stuff around recovery, so shout out to them. But I see that happening a lot, and that's awesome, because that's like, yes, that's what needs to happen next. We need to start saying to people, like, we consist of a massive portion of the population. Most of us, if not all of us at this point, are 1 to 2 degrees of Kevin Bacon away from being near somebody who is struggling with addiction. So we need to get this under wraps, and we need to start having the conversation as a country about this. So I think that's great. The not so great things is, just like with any efforts, if you want something, you got to give something. So it costs a lot of money to do those types of things. Absolutely. And there's a lot of lobbyists that are partaking in different industries right now, and new up and coming industries that I'm not going to mention by name, that see that as a threat. And they don't like that, because it means that they're going to be taking away a customer base.
Right.
So they have actively tried to subvert many different bills or proposed bills and pieces of legislation that would give some teeth to different parts of the recovery community. And instead they have taken those things away and be like, well, no, it will affect this person in a negative way. So I think that's really problematic, but I'm hoping, I know during the Obama administration, of which Biden obviously was a part of, right. There was a lot of really good stuff that was done for the recovery community, a lot of really good stuff that was done for the recovery community. So I'm hoping that Biden keeps that. President Trump did a lot of really good stuff for the recovery community too, did some other stuff too. But, there's always hope, especially with changing in the new guard, that maybe there will be a difference. Maybe there will be a change. I don't know.
Right.
But that's what I hope for at the federal level.
Right. I think it's going to come down to, is it more expensive emotionally, actually financially, and every other aspect as well, to do something, or more expensive not to do something? That's
absolutely
really what it's going to come down to. Yeah. So I want to ask you, barring obviously COVID-19 is a big thing right now, and it is a big problem in the recovery community and just in life in general, right? Mm-hmm. So other than that, what would you say the biggest problem in the recovery community is that you see right now?
Shame, stigma. It's a big one. I think stigma is probably the biggest one. as with everything archetypal, because like I said before, I like to talk in that kind of language. There's a concept inside of the recovery in its totality. All the different meetings, all the different groups that their way is the best. And not by no means is everybody that is affiliated with that group believe that. I want to get that clear. But there is always going to be a handful of individuals in each pocket of those groups that believes their way is the best. And oftentimes those individuals are the loudest. And even though 90% of the group believes there is a multiple pathway model, or that, you can do AA and NA, or if you're in NA, you can certainly come to AA, or there's going to be a lot of people that believe it's like, as long as you're using less today than you were yesterday, and as long as your life is improving to more tomorrow than you were today, we're on the right path. There's going to be a lot of people like that. But as long as there's a small contingent of individuals who are extraordinarily loud, saying like, gosh darn it, AA or nothing else. I'm this individual, and I've been doing this for years and years, and it's impossible to recover without this book or this or this. Right. I think that's a massive problem. You have people, you have essentially recoveries cannibalizing each other, and stepping over each other for nothing. And that's the crazy thing to me. It's the individual across from me's recovery. It is their personal thing. There's hardly anything else in their life that is more personal than that. It is deeply integrated into their identity. Right. And then there's going to be somebody across the table saying to them they're wrong, and that this part of their identity is ridiculous, or this part of their identity is not done the right way because it doesn't look like theirs does. That's insanity. So I think that's a massive, one of the biggest, if not the biggest problems.
Okay. So we have stigma and then a narrow mind of the pathways to recovery.
Yes.
Okay. So what do you see as a possible, so I think you already talked about it somewhat earlier when we talked about it on a national level, sort of seeing people come out and say like, hey, we're here, right? We struggle with addiction. We're out here. And some of those people are going to say, this is how I found recovery. So it opens up more of a broad view, I think.
Sure.
So what are some other ways you see dealing with that? Is exposing a multiple pathways as being successful? What do you think?
You have two mindsets, and this is where things get really murky. There's the in crowd, and then there's the out crowd. There's the people that are in recovery, and then there's everybody else.
Right.
So like me in recovery and you in recovery.
So you guys know we are cooler than you.
Yes, that's exactly right. We're the cool guy club. No, but we are in recovery, and then these people are not in recovery. They don't have the addiction gene, and they're going to do what they're going to do.
Normies is
they're the normies.
Yeah, the normies.
Those normies over there. No, but those people over there, and oftentimes inside of the recovery community, we get down into the mindset of we put a lot of clout in experiential things. We put a lot of clout inside of, well, I forget the word for it, but a lot of clout in the experience of an individual, of data that isn't necessarily empirical. And I think there's a beauty in that, because I think it allows us to discover deeper truths about ourselves and about humanity and about our lives and about collectively our communities that then allow us to kind of see the world in a specific way. The normies, however, a lot of time, they want data-driven results. Right. They want scientific breakthroughs. They want empirical evidence. They want the statistics that say this, this, and this, and this. And I think that that is something that's okay for some things. It is not necessarily okay for all things. And I think we as a recovery community could take some lessons from that. And we can also show them some teachings about having more experiential things around your recovery. I think as far as the, advancement or changing things in the recovery community, that it does revolve around quite a bit of wanting to do old things in new ways, if that makes sense. I mean, I think this is a perfect example, what we're doing right now. We don't have a lot of data to prove that this podcast is going to be anything. But what we do have is that podcasts historically are very successful. Podcasts are a portion of new media. New media is the next horizon in a lot of things. There are recovery podcasts out there. They have done some success around them. Therefore, I feel like we are displaying some older ideas in this podcast that can then be hopefully successful in a new media or in a new way. So I think that things like this, things like some, experiences and some statistically driven things are really what is going to be the next phases in recovery.
Absolutely. So let's break off just a little bit and do another conversation here. So what would you say to somebody who has a family member, child, whether that be a child or a significant other or something like that, that is struggling with addiction right now?
Well, first and foremost, I would tell them, don't panic, like breathe, take a beat. I think that's first and foremost, that's the most important thing, especially when you're struggling with somebody with addiction, loved one, child, whatever it might be. We start to make very emotionally based decisions, and that can lead to death in a real quick hurry, or at least a lot of hurt. Find someone, surround yourself with people that know what they're doing, that have went through it before, and that can talk to you about what is happening and talk you through what is happening. We mentioned, I believe it was in your interview, Families Against Narcotics.
Yes.
Get something like a family coach, somebody that's going to be able to sit you down and say, they're going to call you and they're going to want this and they're going to want that. And this is where you're going to go. I know that we will be interviewing an affiliate of Families Against Narcotics, at least in the Ingham County area. We're going to be interviewing Phil Pavona. And Phil, this is what he does. He has had a son, and I'm not going to go too much into his story, but he's had a son that has passed because of overdose. But the reality is, he a lot of the time will basically be hand in hand with the family and all surrounding individuals that the individual person struggling with addiction is in association with, whether it be the family, the girlfriend, boyfriend, doctors, therapists, lawyers, recovery coaches. He'll get them all on the same page. And then it'll be very clear and say, you're going to be honest about these things, and you're going to do drops and stuff like that. And then he will coach the family as the individual calls and says, Mom, I need some money. And then the next thing that will happen is Mom will call Phil. He wants this and that. What should I do? And Phil will say, I'll tell him no. I'll do it for you sometimes. And sometimes he'll coach him and say, no, you need to do this. I think a family coach is unbelievably important to the process, because being in that moment where your loved one is OD'd on your couch, or OD'd on your couch last week, and is, he's now smoking weed or shooting up in the basement or whatever, and having support where somebody can step in the gap and say, you're going to make a lot of emotional decisions. You're going to base a lot on emotion. I've had this happen to me before. I know what to do. And they step in the gap and say, no, this is what's going to happen. And this is what's going to happen. Just being able to kind of be that one little step away, or that buffer there where you're not necessarily directly connected with the individual, it makes an unbelievable amount of difference.
Absolutely. A little bit less investment inside of the whole relationship side of it. Yeah,
absolutely.
So what would you say to somebody struggling with addiction? Let's go to the actual individual. Say somebody's listening to this podcast right now and they're struggling with addiction. Maybe they found a little bit of recovery, maybe not. What advice would you give to them?
Well, first and foremost, I'd ask them what they want. That's really what it is. I think and I would want to sit them down and truly look them dead in the eyes and say, I'm not here to make jokes with. I'm not here to laugh with. I'm not here to be one of your buddies or whatever, where we can joke about, whatever happened on TV or a movie or whatever they did or he did or she did. I would ask them, no, what do you want? Do you want success in life? Do you want to live in your own house? Do you want to start a career? Do you want to start a family? Do you want to be responsible? Do you want to not worry where your next meal is going to come from? Do you want to be able to wake up in the morning and feel a sense of pride about what you're doing with your life? Do you want to be able to pursue your hobbies? Is that what you want? Because if that's what you want, then we need to have a serious conversation about what is next, about the things that need to happen. And if that's not what you want, then you can continue to use. But at the end of the day, I would have a conversation with somebody who is thinking about getting in recovery and tell them very clearly, like, it is possible. It's absolutely possible. Many have done it. It is possible for you. I believe it's possible. The question is, do you believe it's possible? Because if you don't believe it's possible, then this probably is not going to happen. But if you believe it's possible, then it's about a fight. I'm not saying you're going to stop using today. I'm not saying you're going to stop using tomorrow or possibly even a month from now. But I am saying, what can we start to do? What's one behavior a day that we can start to change that is going to make an improvement in your life in the long run? And then hopefully be able to have a conversation with them about, once again, their goals and their obstacles to those goals and really setting something forward. Because I think, at least in my experience, and I don't know about you, but I've been a recovery coach to a lot of different people. And one thing that ultimately comes up over and over again for people who are just starting to get into recovery and maybe have tried it many times before, or maybe this is their first time. They don't know where they're going.
Yeah.
And it's because they're lost that they're afraid and they're not sure what's next. I love the analogy. I think it was, not important, but the analogy of a pool versus an ocean. When you're in early recovery, you need to be in a pool, because when you're in the pool, you know where the sides are, you know where the deep end is. It's okay. You got the lifeguard there. It's an individual. It's basically, there are boundaries. In an early recovery, it is good to have boundaries. It is good to feel a little overprotected. It is good to feel like you're not necessarily doing this all on your own, whether it's with support from loved ones, whether it's with support from a therapist or recovery coach, whether it's with support from a medication-assisted treatment or therapy. These are all okay. You do not want to be dropped in the ocean where you're not sure where you're going to go.
Unless you have a lifeboat.
Unless you're, hey, self-promotion. No, but you do not want to be dropped in the ocean where you're not sure what is next. You're not sure how it's going to go. So back to your initial question, I would sit them down and say, I believe in you and I want to make a plan. How do you make a plan for your life? I mean, starting from where do you want to be in 1 month, 2 years, whatever it might be. Where do you want to be? What are some real goals? What were your hobbies as a kid? I don't care if you want to be a space princess ninja astronaut, something. I don't care.
Right.
But it's like, where do you want to be? And then let's slowly but surely peel back the layers and see where you are now. And how do we get there? You're going to need the license. You're going to need to pay off some bills. You're going to need to get the house. You're going to need to go and apply for a job. You're going to need to go get the GED to get the college education. You're going to need these things possibly. And those things are possible. One thing that I often, and I'm pretty sure I did this to you. I know I did this to you,
Probably.
actually. One thing that I often talk to recoveries on is I ask them what their age is. And I put something in perspective for them, which is, how long does it take to get a doctorate in the United States? It can take anywhere from, 7, 8, 9 years. Okay, let's assume that you have no high school education, so you need a GED. Ultimately, from getting a GED to getting a doctorate, it could take upwards of about 15 years, maybe a little bit less than that, maybe a little bit more, but not much. When I'm talking to young people, especially like 40 or not 40, but like 30, 25, something like that, which is, I talk to them all the time. It's like, think about that. 15 years from now, you could have a doctorate, which means, at 30 years old, you'd be 45 and have a doctorate, which means if you retire out at 65, you've got 20 years to practice. What are we doing? Your life is ahead of you. Keep going. And if you're an older recovery, that's okay too. Because it then comes down to, maybe you don't want to pursue those things, but maybe you want a house or something like that. It's like, okay, is it possible to get a home loan? Is it possible to do these things? Let's put those things in place. I don't believe, barring there's a handful of things, very, very, very small amount of things that would make it so that your life darn near is doomed to misery. Barring you don't have any of those things, there's no excuse not to start working towards life, not to start working towards everything that you've ever imagined. We're fortunate enough to live in a place and in a time where there's so many supports that can really help you to get to where you want to go. And that's essentially what I would say right off the clip. I tell them, I believe in you. Let's make a plan. The future is yours for the taking if you want it, and I'll help you get it. but you have to want it, because if you don't want it, it's a waste of your time and it's a waste of mine.
Absolutely. I like that. There's a lot of good stuff in there. So what area do you feel like the recovery community could grow in at this moment?
New media. Honestly. I would love to see, we see it. We see it all over the place. And one of the interesting things to me, and I'm going to use this as an analogy, I'm not going to be political by any means, but, we have a society that essentially is divided amongst Democratic liberals, Republican conservative, and then there's kind of a middle ground. But there is media and culture and complete boxing in of walls, interconnectivity inside of each of those domains. There is if you're a liberal or Democrat, you watch these news sites, you do these things, you scroll on this website, you comment on these, this is how you speak, this is where you go, this is how you interact with people, yada, yada, yada. Same thing with the conservative side. What would that look like if it was in recovery? What would it look like if we got media sources from recovery-friendly media sources that is not only going to maybe talk about today's news, but at the same time talk even furthermore about the recovery news, talking from things like, well, these are what's happening with different recovery bills. These are different things like this. Like what would that look like for us? Because it's like we're a big enough portion of the population. Why not? So I would like to see that happen. I think that would be an absolute place that we could work on. That, we as recovery coaches, we train this and we know that we hope for this, but we want to be the faces and voices against stigma. And we want to say, we are here, we're recovering, we're a part of the population. We need to be respected. We need a voice at the table. We want, to be represented in the higher chambers of power, all those kinds of things. But it's like, why stop there?
Right.
Why wouldn't we want to create such a culture where it's like, recovery it's something that you're networked into. It's something that's like, as soon as you decide to flip that switch, you can dive into an entire world of listen to these news stations. They're not gonna be, politically motivated. They're going to talk about recovery news. They're going to talk about things like that, or go to these different places. It's a sober, it's a sober fun house or whatever. It's a sober this or a sober that. Right. We so often are just relegated to this point of like, well, we go to our meetings and that is pretty much it. It's like, man, that's great. And I love it. And it's fantastic. Let's do more though. Right. Let's really how do we change the culture? We become the culture itself. Mm-hmm. We're a subculture right now, but how do you essentially make the subculture the new way of being? Right. So that's how I think it should happen, but it won't happen that way. But that's how I hope it would happen.
Well, I will say I've noticed a big increase in stigma reduction.
Absolutely.
Even in the time I've been in recovery.
Absolutely.
So it might be a possibility in the near future. Never really know.
Here's hoping.
Yeah. So how do you feel? I want to go off script here just a little bit. So how do you feel about?
He's not on a script. Yeah, he's on a script.
there might be some bullet points. But how do you feel that stigma affects somebody wanting to enter into recovery that is struggling with active addiction? How do you feel that stigma also keeps them in a reclusive state of telling people that they're struggling?
Oh my gosh. How I feel about it is horrible, mm-hmm. is wretched. I think it's sad and it's so difficult. I'm fully aware that there is people out there that consider addiction sinful or a disease to be a scourge of society, almost at like the plague or like you're getting leprosy or something like that. Right. And I know that there's been who knows how many people that have thought the thought that they needed to. Yeah, I saw the phone.
I'm just
so it's an ongoing problem.
There will not be a podcast where my phone doesn't go off once. Okay.
I'm fully aware that there's been many people that are about to have that revelation of recovery. They're about to get it. And then something happens. Somebody says something, they look at them wrong, they look at them funny, and it's just like, you're an idiot, go away. I think that the best that we can do is continue on every front to be voices for change, to be voices of recovery positive language, I am never going to curtail somebody's speech.
What is recovery positive language for people who don't know?
So recovery positive language, first and foremost, it's cognizant. It is something that takes thought. You have to stop yourself. If you listen to all of this, if you listen to the entire podcast and go back, I challenge you, tell me one time that I called somebody an addict. I didn't, because I said people were addicted. I said people struggling with addiction, but I didn't say addict. And because addict is a form of stigmatization. It is something that is often found inside of literature. It is something that's often found in movies, in media, and press. The addict, the person that should have. And it's a mark of shame and guilt. And it shouldn't be, because it's a disease. It's a clinically proven in the DSM. It is a disease. There is entire fields of science and neurobiology that is connected to this specific disease. And then the people that want to write it off as if it's like a moral failing or a sin, it's just disheartening to me sometimes, because it's just like, in what world? This has been a field of study for, well, if we going all the way back to the foundings of AA, since 1930, it's been a field of interest and study and influence since at least then, going back further, definitely, but in a very real systematic way since the 50s and 60s. So where are we getting to a point that people are saying, well, it's just a moral failing? It's just like, the science is out on that, man. You're wrong.
Right.
Not well, that's your opinion. No, you're wrong. Science says so.
Right.
There is, well, globally, nationally recognized scientists that advise the United Nations and advise the president of the United States and advise all the different powers and leaders in the world about addiction. You're wrong. What else would you need to say? But yet people consistently stigmatize individuals. And all I can say to them is, like, try your best. Instead of saying addiction, somebody who is, instead of saying addicts, somebody who's struggling with addiction, or somebody who is in early recovery, or somebody who is recovering, or somebody who is trying to find recovery or trying to find themselves, or whatever it might be. But stop labeling as them because they put a needle in their arm or put something up their nose that they're meant to be written off by society. Because guess what? 99.99999 infinitum times, oftentimes that person doesn't want to do that anymore. Yes, there's going to be the yahoos that can do it once and not do it again. But the person that is living under a bridge, doing it over and over and over again, guess what? They don't want to do it either. But their brain is so hardwired at this point that they need to. And then we're holding them responsible. And it's like what we talked about last week of, like, they started using it at 14 years old. At what level does the onus of responsibility not fall on the individual? Because there's something there.
And we will be talking a little bit more about neurochemistry in future podcasts as well, and talking about that prefrontal cortex being undeveloped, and then the loop that starts happening.
Let me clarify that. We will be talking. We very down here. We're very down.
We'll be talking to people smarter than us.
Much smarter than us. We'll be talking to people like doctors, people that actually know what they're talking about. And those doctors that I said that, they're evidence that you're wrong. We'll be talking to those people that actually know what they're doing.
Yeah. So not us. You don't have to. We won't put you through an hour of that. So back with the original question there. So how do you feel like that keeps somebody out of recovery because they're ashamed to reach out for help?
Puts the wall up, man, because they feel, a lot of times we have to recognize that those people they don't have experiences with recovery like we do.
Right.
What do we have an experience of? We have an experience of an army, a flood of people that talk about recovery and positive language, that if I went to, man, I'm struggling today, they'd be the first person to say, let's get in the big book. You need to go to a meeting tonight, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
They don't have people like that. And they very well may have never been exposed to people like that. Therefore, they have people in their life. They're struggling with this thing that say, basically, you're an idiot, you're a fool, you shouldn't be doing this. And then they go and they have no other outlet. They don't know about us. They don't know that there's people out there that it's like, no. Try asking it not to this person, but to this person. Because when you ask to this person, you're going, oh, I'm done here. I'm going to go do it again.
Right.
Yes, this person, they're going to be like, let's go to a meeting. Come on. I know like 5 tonight that we could go to.
Right.
Right. And we can go to one after another. Now we can go through the entire morning of meetings. Let's get it going. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're kind of getting towards the end of our time here. I still want to ask you one more question, which is, what do you think, in your opinion, is the best way to recover?
Oh, gosh.
In your opinion?
In my opinion. So obviously, multiple pathways is what we've been saying time and time again. I personally think the best way to recover, personally, in my opinion, is support. Is a supported recovery, is one that, at least in the beginnings of it, does not rely completely on you and your ability to recover and your ability to say, no more, and shut the world out and all those kinds of things. There are people out there that can do that. And to you, I say, wow, that's amazing.
Good job. Right.
As for me and mine, very difficult to do that.
Right.
So I would say that peer support based recovery is the best way to go, because I teach it. But finding somebody that's went through it, finding somebody that's able to walk you through it, finding somebody that's going to keep you accountable, that's going to call you on the weekend or whatever, say, how did that go? I've got guys that they tell me that, hey, I got this going on in March. And then all of a sudden in March, we're having a conversation, and, hey, by the way, how did that thing go this last week? I'm like, how did you know that? And it's like, because I write it down, because I remember, because I care, because I want you to be successful. So finding recovery with somebody like that, I think is remarkable. And I think personally, once again, my own opinion, that's the best way to go, is find somebody that's done it, ask them how you got there, and then ask them how they got there, and then start walking the path with them.
For sure. So second last question here. I
Okay.
promise. This might be the last one. So when you approached me about this podcast and asked me if I wanted to join it, so there's obviously something that sparked this interest inside of you. So what do you think is going to come out of this podcast? Why are we doing this right now?
Well, a lot of the reason I think we're doing this is because there's a lot of recovery podcasts out there. There's a lot of great recovery podcasts out there. And I don't want to necessarily rehash it out. This podcast is done, I believe, in a unique way, that we're trying to get the best of many worlds. We've got this interview format where we're going to be talking to really interesting people. I am going to be next week interviewing Reverend Dr. Deborah Smith, who is unbelievably intelligent woman.
Absolutely.
And a force to be not to be trifled with. I mean, she's fantastic. At the same time, I think that this podcast is going to be driving people as far as knowledge base and things like that. And that's our Monday, where we talk with politicians, we talk with influencers, we talk with the doctors and people who have boots on the ground, who have been in recovery, and we talk to them about chemistry. We talk to them about things that people need to know when they're getting into recovery. And then on Wednesdays, meditations and things like that. So I think the main reason that I wanted to do this, and I found that it was going to be so interesting, is, once again, I'm trying to stay consistent here. I believe that we can be doing more. I believe that recovery can make itself and carve itself such out in the American and global culture in such a way that we are a powerhouse. We are individuals where it's not just us trying to go to this, the doors of the Senate or the state floor, and I need a bill, or, hey, can we get a little bit more money, and pleading and hoping that we're going to be funded. Like, how do we get past that? How do we get to the point where it's like, we don't need to do that anymore, because we're self-sustaining. We shop at recovery businesses. We know who is in recovery places and things like that, so that when people look at us, they're saying, those are the recovery people. We like those people. At the same time, media and Hollywood movies and things like, they stop talking about recovery in a negative context. They start talking about recovery as a positive thing. They stop looking at like the drug addict or whatever, and start saying the guy in recovery, for gosh sakes, people like Iron Man, once again, people like Robert Downey Jr., Samuel L. Jackson, Russell Brand, these people that are all in recovery, and start talking about them in such a way that it's like, this is something that people should want. And I think by doing that, we reduce the stigma. By reducing the stigma, we start to see that stat that I was talking about slowly but surely decrease.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure interviewing you, man. It's all stuff that I think we've talked about, pretty extensively, but I like talking about it again. So
definitely.
Yeah.
All right.